Hello and welcome everyone, my name is Captain Frost. Recently I've made a video about all the combat changes in Path of Exile and how it will change the game drastically, how people are underestimating how it will all go down. They've saw the two trailers and they still didn't realize to the extent of how much of a difference Path of Exile 2 will be to the Path of Exile 1, and that Path of Exile 2 that we've saw 2 and 4 years ago, it's not even the same game that we've saw in our recent teasers, promotions for ExileCon 2, and there were many discussions. People were angry at me, mostly at me for bringing that that information to them. They are saying that you're wrong, you can't really do that with game. That's not my main point for this video. In this video, I want to address one specific thing that people were bringing up: why you can't make multiple active skills, builds with multiple active skills on pair with builds that have only one main active skill, and why they can't live together in the same game. Why can't you have this diversity in terms of your gameplay styles? And it's basically, if I was short, it's unbalanceable and it's unrealistic. You can't really do that. If I was to argument my position here and why you can't really do that, I'm gonna do it right now. So basically, the biggest problem with current Path of Exile gameplay is not even the one skill, even though that's a problem as well. The biggest problem is your speed of your character, movement speed, and more of a problem are movement skills. Movement skills in this game trivialize all the content that is present. They trivialize encounters with monsters in your maps. They trivialize boss fights to the extent that if you have enough damage and you can dodge the most powerful abilities of the enemy with your instant spell, then you're good to go. You probably don't really need anything else. You will still be able to do everything. And when it comes to random encounters in maps, you just need to one-shot everything that you see. Otherwise, if that deals damage to you, or at least 5, 7, 10 mobs of 100 that are present on your screen deals damage to you, you're dead. So as you can see, the problem with speed creep and power creep, but here we're talking more about speed creep, is that whenever you're making player more agile, more fast, and being able to traverse the ground instantaneously, you need to create something similar for the enemy to match the player, at least in some situations, for player to feel this challenge at least sometimes. And that's what we've seen with Arch Nemesis, with many, with some of mob mods, with some of maybe Essence mods combined with Arch Nemesis stuff, with Soul Eater and stuff like that. We do have crazy amounts of damage on enemies. We do have crazy amounts of damage multipliers and health multipliers on enemies, just like with Crucible mobs. And we do have unreasonably high amounts of speed on enemies, to the point where you can't really realistically react to what that monster is doing. Even if you have tools to deal with that, to dodge something, if that monster hits some movement speed threshold, then you're probably just dead whenever it sees you, and you probably wouldn't even see it. Only if you can off-screen it. So the absence of cooldown on your movement skill creates a meta and creates a balancing system, balancing problem, where you have to give more speed to enemy, and it all ramps to the extent where it's not healthy. And yeah, it's basically, you just need to stack even more damage in order to 100% one-shot the enemy. Otherwise, it will kill you, no problems, and you wouldn't have any ability to respond to the enemy. With adding a cooldown to movement skills, you can basically resolve this problem just like that. If you have a cooldown on your movement skills, that means that developers can slow down the enemies as well with you. They can create a situation where you will see what your enemy does and you will have time to react to it. Even though it shouldn't be as slow, just like it's 2 FPS, and it wouldn't be a situation where you feel powerless and you feel that everything is sluggish and slow, like it is in lower levels of Path of Exile currently. It just will be a way more measurable speed. How we've seen it in teaser trailers for Path of Exile 2, where we have this small blink abilities that still look pretty good. They still feel quite fast. They still feel reasonably AoE'd. So it's not like you will have a small AoE, 30 seconds cooldown on your blink skills and no way to dodge enemies' attacks. It's that you will have incrementally less things, but you will more tools. So it's gonna be more tools, but the tools themselves will not be as ridiculously powerful as the ones that we're currently having. Now, if you're on this argument with me and you understand that movement skills without any cooldown and without any cast time that are fast as fuck and that you can just roll out whenever you need to dodge anything that basically flies towards you. If you think as well that it is kind of a problem and that it creates this unhealthy situation where you need to only try to one-shot enemy, otherwise if your build is not very high on damage, then you don't really have any ability to match the speed of the enemy. If you're on par with me on that, then how can you possibly do movements to do subset of skills that you have if you have your main movement skill on a cooldown and it is a leap slam, for example? How can you dodge smaller abilities from the enemy that you see that they are on a reasonable pace, but there are still multiple of them and you need to get rid of them all? You need to dodge them all, but you only have one skill with 4 or 5 or 6 seconds cooldown. How can you do that? You can't. You need to have multiple skills with multiple cooldowns so that in situations where you need to use them in succession, you see that there is a bunch of attacks that are going to hit you and you need to dodge them, and then you will have a window of opportunity to attack the enemy. You need to have more than one movement skill. How can you do that? You probably need to tie your movement skill or your movement ability to move fast. You need to tie it to your main skills. You need to tie it to skills that you're dealing damage with anyways. And so that way you wouldn't feel that you're blinking all fight with your 2 or 3 abilities, rotating between them, waiting for the moment when you can use your main skill. This way you will feel that you're using your main skill, your ability that deals damage, only 1/4 of the time of the fight with the boss. Which means that you need to tie, you need to tie your movement abilities with damage dealing abilities, or you need to make your movement skills deal more damage, which we saw basically in the trailer of PoE 2. And whenever you're introducing all the cooldowns to the movement skills, you're making multiple skills that will have a little bit of cooldown that are gonna be dealing damage. You're probably already not in a situation where you have only one main skill, and you can't really have an opportunity to have one button builds, because one button builds wouldn't be able to deal with the movement problem, because you don't have movement skills that don't have cooldowns. So that's basically, at least from my own understanding, especially hearing all the conversation on Exile Con 1, and yeah, how developers and hearing all the conversations about Ruthless and how with Ruthless they've deleted all the movement skills, and that's not a healthy way for you to deal with a problem, at least in my opinion as well. Even though they've given builds dash ability that gives you dash on a big cooldown ability that gives you a way for dodging something, but still most builds in Ruthless play with a bunch of Quicksilver flasks to have more speed to clear faster in maps. And yeah, you're even with how flask charges suck in Ruthless, they still do that. So it's not an adequate solution, and that's because it was built inside PoE 1 that has all this restriction, that has this current situation of how combat works. And I'm for sure know that GGG they're not really okay with how either Ruthless goes or regular play goes, because nobody in their mind would be fine with people having only one travel ability that has something like 10 seconds cooldown, and then you're forced to get all the Quicksilver flasks up and running, and you can't really... Where is the diversity in that, you may ask? And there is no. So basically your defensive flasks, your offensive flasks, they all are meaningless because you just don't have enough speed in order to tackle the challenges that were created specifically in mind with the current power curve, power creep in the game. So because of all the encounters and all the enemies, for example, in Ruthless, are created in mind with a player that has no movement skill cooldown, no cooldown movement skill, it creates this situation where mobility is everything, and you can't really play without multiple Quicksilver flasks if you don't have your movement skills. So yeah, basically movement in the game and speed in the game is probably one of the main reasons why you need to have more than one active skill, because you just can't really sustain this situation with having a lip slam or shield charge with zero cooldown. And yeah, flame dash, it has cooldown, but it has 3 stacks, and they're resetting quite fast. So it's still kind of a high enough amount of mobility that is probably unhealthy for the game as well. And developers, GGG, they are faced with this problem constantly. They're faced with this problem every day, every time when they want to create new pinnacle boss for you, when they want to create new interesting league mechanic for you, and they know that your builds are gonna trivialize it, first because of how much damage you can deal, and second with how much movement you have. And then they need to ramp this up to some unreasonable state, and yeah, and that creates this problem. So in my opinion, I don't really think that these two systems can coexist. That builds with, but maybe, again, I'm not a game developer by any means. I do have some thoughts about it, but I'm not a genius, and I can't really. I don't really think that the one main skill play style is healthy or interesting, but even if it was the case, and if I was wrong about it, you still have various other problems present in the game that multiple skill style of combat will resolve, and you can't really resolve that problem otherwise. So yeah, basically I guess that's it. I don't really think that they will maintain 2 versions of combat, I guess, or they will I don't really think as well that they will maintain 2 versions of Path of Exile being completely separate. So Path of Exile 1 will have 1 button ability one main ability combat, and Path of Exile 2 will go with this new model of combat, and then they will have the same end game between them. How do you imagine they can possibly balance that out between these two distinctly different playstyles, where you need to have your damage values, where you need to have your defense values completely different, where you need to have your movement abilities, your flasks, the way that flasks recharge, the way that you have or don't have cooldowns on your flasks as well? How can you manage all that with being directly compared to Path of Exile 1 version of the game, where there's no cooldowns on anything and you're just blasting straight up every single second? I don't think that they will dedicate two different diverse developer developer parts, and they will just part their studio in two, and one will go with Path of Exile 1, second one will design PoE 2. That's gonna be a hot mess. The thing that I think they will do is they will have Path of Exile 2, and it will have two campaigns. And everything will be on one single client, everything will be on one single servers. And yeah, it will have balancing of PoE 2, and Path of Exile 1 style of balancing will go away. Even though it's sad for some people, that's just the only way how you can reasonably continue to create at least somewhat interesting fights that wouldn't be trivialized completely by the characters that have played 5 or 10 hours of the end game. Yeah, so maybe I'm over exaggerating in some parts, but I still think that it's inevitable with how everything will change, and people who want to have both sides, I understand them. It would have been cool to have that. It would have been, I'm not against it, especially if they would have been able to develop two games simultaneously, but I just don't think that's realistic, and I don't think they have enough time. I don't think they have enough power, and I don't think that there will be enough. I don't think there will be enough demand of gameplay style of PoE 1 after Path of Exile is released for 2 or 3 weeks. After 2 or 3 weeks of everybody playing new system, everyone's gonna be cool with that. It's just a novelty of that. Mostly that is problematic to this extent, and then everything will be just fine. Yeah, it's gonna be your new way of playing the game. It's gonna be way more multi-leveled. You will be able to combine different skills in your builds. You will have even more ways to theory craft everything and to recombine to make different combinations of multiple skills. You will have your dash button on all characters, probably from the level 1. You will have some additional movement. You will be able to combine different active / movement skills together in order to create something interesting, and so on and so on. It just gives you this massive perspective on all the new ways how you can play the game. And the only way that was in the past that you've lost is the way for you to jump with lip slam or charge with shield charge every 0.2 seconds to a new pack, and then one tap it with your main ability, then jump with the same ability and one tap the new one. And it's kind of mind blowing that people think that they have this diversity currently when it's only 4 or 5 movement skills in the game, and 3 of them are the most used. And it was like this for almost 10 years. For almost 10 years, people used 2 or 3, mostly 5 movement skills across all their characters and all their different builds, and this is somehow okay. I truly don't understand it, and I don't yeah, I'm not in that camp. I don't think so. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you're having a good time. Goodbye.